Baseball isn't just numbers, numbers, numbers.
This game is not being played on computers.
You don't do that with a bunch of statistical gimmicks.
You don't put a team together with a computer.
We're talking weighted runs created plus,
expected WOBA,
his sweet spot rate,
defensive runs above average,
average exit velocity,
barrel rate,
xFIP,
BABIP,
SIERA.
We are above replacement radio. And welcome to Above Replacement Radio, where we're talking baseball kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Gianta. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm doing very, very well today. There's interestingly for maybe the first time in an off-season show since people started falling off the board. There really hasn't been a ton that's happened in the last week. I think the biggest transaction news is probably Charlie Morton signing a one-year deal with the Orioles, which happened last night as we're recording this on Friday night. This is now Saturday afternoon. So there's not a whole lot to talk about in terms of players going to new teams, re-signing with old teams, getting traded. So I think we're going to use this episode to talk about some of the remaining free agents, the rumors that have been floated around, and what we expect will happen, because we really haven't had a chance to do that this offseason.
Yeah, for sure. It just seems like kind of with the timing of everything, when there wasn't much action, there was usually like some sort of holiday going on. So, we weren't able to, get on the podcast anyway. But yeah, like there with, it's easy to forget with all this off-season action. There are still some pieces that need to come off the board. And get to new teams, complete new teams. But yeah, where did we kind of want to start?
Well, I mean, the biggest free agents that are still on the board are, Alex Bregman, Anthony Santander, Jack Flaherty, Pete Alonso, Tanner Scott. What have you thought about, these markets? Do you feel like we're going to see guys getting the deals they want? Do you think it's going to be a repeat of last off season with guys like Matt Chapman, Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery getting kind of the 1+1 type of deals? Like where do we think these guys will end up in terms of actual contract value here?
Yeah, I feel like it certainly depends on the player. Someone like Alex Bregman, I feel like it's more safe to assume that he would get a pretty good deal. Yeah. Considering his track record and pretty long history of at least general success, maybe not always being necessarily an MVP candidate, but he's always at least been a pretty productive player. Whereas, someone like Jack Flaherty, he's still on a bit on the younger side. But someone like Jack Flaherty, he really had a really good year last year, showed flashes of honestly, pure greatness. However, in the preceding years to that, it was in a certain respect kind of a mess. 2023 he had a 4.99 ERA and a 6.75 ERA with the Orioles. Year before that he had a FIP near 5 in the limited amount of innings that he had, and just was not able to consistently be on the mound in general throughout any year from 2020 to 2023, or 2020 to 2022 at least, and then was not really a consistent performer in 2023. However, in 2024 he truly breaks out, throws 162 innings, 3.17 ERA, 1.27 ERA plus, 3.47 FIP, great strikeout to walk numbers, and has some good postseason performances to go with that. And he's also only heading into his age 29 season. So the upside is certainly there. I just think, similar to guys like Blake Snell and Cody Bellinger last year, specifically parallel to those two, I think teams are kind of waiting to trust someone like Jack Flaherty. Whereas, Alex Bregman, I would be surprised if he got one of those weird short deals with an opt-out and stuff like that. Whereas Flaherty, I certainly wouldn't be as surprised.
I honestly do think Flaherty is looking for a long-term deal. I mean, he was a free agent last year and got, this 1 year sort of prove it deal, and he did prove it. So I think, he's got to be more inclined. I believe the latest on him is that he's looking for a 5-year deal. He is still pretty young. That would take him, he's going into age 29 next year, so that would take him through age 33. So the biggest risk is, obviously there's always going to be, like regulated risk with pitchers, like just by default. But the fact that he really had his breakout last year, it was that a 1 year thing? Is that who he really is? I think there's good reason for it. I think he improved in all of the right places. His strikeout rate obviously went up quite a bit. His walk rate went down. The home run ball did hurt him a little more than it did usually, which is even concerning considering he, was in Detroit for half the season, and that's, a pitcher friendly ballpark, at least on the home run front. I do think he'll get, multiple years. I think he would be inclined to take just the best multi-year deal that he gets from here on out. Maybe he's already gotten that offer. Maybe he hasn't. Pitching is obviously very expensive nowadays, starting pitching especially. I have to imagine he takes, I don't know if he gets 5 years. I would imagine he gets 3 or 4 with maybe some
Right.
options.
Yeah, but I think in that case, if he's only getting 3 or 4, he might want to, try another sort of putting yourself on the line type deal, or
Mhm.
prove it deal, I guess. Because yeah, the difference between this upcoming free agency and last is there probably wasn't much being offered that weren't 1 year deals for him. That was kind of his only option.
Mhm.
There wasn't really any good logical explanation to have to try and sign him for 3 years last year. It just, I I would have been very surprised if a team offered something like that to him. Whereas this year, yeah, there's obvious upside to signing him to a multi-year deal, and I think especially given his age, say that if the Red Sox offered him a 5 year deal, I wouldn't scoff at that. I think that would be a cool thing. But if he's not being offered 5+ year deals, I think the correct route would be to try not necessarily get a 1 year deal, but one of those 2 3 year deals with the opt out after the first season to to uh improve his value. And I think what it may be discouraging for some people, but given how Blake Snell's free agency worked out this year, and if you have that self belief, that may be something that's attractive. And I think the Blake Snell there's two ways to look at it: the Blake Snell deal and the Jordan Montgomery deal. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
but if there's
But
self
I would
belief,
hope Jack Flaherty doesn't think that he's 2024 Jordan Montgomery.
yeah,
That's not a very kind thing to think of yourself as.
exactly. So yeah, I think given how Blake Snell's deal happened, if he's not getting the attention he wants in the free agent market this year, I could certainly see him taking one of those sort of not necessarily 1 year deals, but 1 year deals if he wants to make it a 1 year deal, just basically having the opt out.
Just to give you an idea of what kind of improvements Jack Flaherty made last year, he upped his strikeout by 7.1% from 22.8% to 29.9%. The 7.1% increase was the fifth highest among qualifiers between the 2023 and 24 seasons. And additionally, in walk rate, he decreased the walk rate by 4.3% from 10.2 to 5.9. That was the 11th best improvement. So, I mean, he drastically improved his strikeout and walk rates. I would imagine the strikeout minus walk rate was probably the best in the majors. I'd have to, do that math a little more manually, but I mean, that's obviously a very high bar that he set for himself on pretty much all fronts outside of the home run ball. So, it's very possible this might be the best his value he ever has coming into an offseason, especially given that, he is young, right? Like next year, it is very arbitrary, but next year you do have he's on the wrong side of 30 discussions if he's a free agent again. Um, and this year he doesn't have that. He's going into age 29. So I don't know. I think, yeah, there's a lot of options out there. I don't think I don't think I'd fault him for much of anything outside of a 1 year deal. I would definitely question that kind of thinking because there is so much that went right for him this year, and he's getting, I would imagine, more money than maybe he was hoping for this time last year. That he'd be, available for. I mean, he had a fantastic season, obviously. Uh, you know, won a World Series, was a big part of that team, had some really good outings in the playoffs. Had some bad ones too, but that he also did have some good ones, and that's very important to just at least prove that you can do it in the playoffs, which he did with the Cardinals previously, but did it again with the Dodgers this year.
Yeah, and I guess regarding his performance, or like regarding the market for him right now, I think things look a lot differently for him and a
Hmm.
lot more secure for him if you reversed his um season, essentially. Like if his Tigers numbers happened in the last two thirds of the season instead of the first two-thirds of the season, and the
Hmm.
Dodgers numbers happened in the first third of the season and not the last third. And he wasn't bad with the Dodgers. It's just the domination factor was not as present when he was with the Dodgers. His strikeout minus walk rate was over 27% with the Tigers, and it was about 18% with the Dodgers. And it didn't necessarily translate into the postseason either. He wasn't necessarily dominating in the strikeout department in the playoffs. So I think that may be factoring into some hesitancy with teams going out and trying to sign him, because yeah, like just the way he ended the season, it was a little bit, he had a FIP over 4 with the Dodgers. Not necessarily like that. It was 55 innings, so a somewhat smaller sample size, but still, like he did not. He was not that dominant factor the entire season, and he ended in a lot more, um, in a lot less dominating fashion than he started. So I do wonder if that has an effect on how teams kind of perceive him.
Yeah, it's very possible. I think the biggest issue is the maybe even the home runs. Like I think that's very much a potential concern. Like he had, granted the home run to fly ball ratio was a little unfair last year, 15%, which is higher than usual. But 1.33 home runs per nine, and a lot of that coming in Detroit is obviously not great. But yeah, I mean the strikeout to walks, even if it's even if it's in the middle between that 27% and 18%, I think that's still very much worthwhile in whatever a team is realistically going to offer him.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Like if he finds a way to balance that out, that is certainly worth a long-term investment. And north of 25 million per year. I think, yeah, I just wonder if teams think I wonder if teams think he's closer to the Dodgers version than the Tigers version, even
Mm-hmm.
though he had less innings in with the Dodgers. But yeah, that's all stuff that I think that's a lot of stuff where um, it's inside info, and you don't really know exactly how teams are going to view him. So it's a thing where I feel like we're going to find out once the free agency is over. But it's kind of all speculation right now.
In regards to that home run rate, by the way, uh, in 2023, uh, hitters hit 103 fly balls against Jack Flaherty, and 31.1% of them were pulled. This year, 37.8% of them were pulled, which is about 11 points above the major league average. The reason I cite pulled fly balls, as you'll hear me cite pretty much on every show where I'm doing deep analytical breakdowns of hitters or pitchers, is because you obviously have the most power to the pull side, and not to mention the fence is also shorter than if you went to, say, center field. So, if you're giving up a lot of, fly balls on the pull side, it's probably going to result in more home runs just naturally. So I think that definitely played a role. Just to give you an idea, it was the highest percent of fly balls that were pulled off Jack Flaherty since 2018. And also, by the way, he also gives up a lot of fly balls in general as well. So, that's definitely why the home run rate was so high. It's interesting because the whiff rate went up, the chase rate went up. Like people weren't timing his pitches very well, but they also were, in terms of making contact. So it's an interesting thing there. But yeah.
Yeah, right, right, right. Yeah, very, very almost Garrett Cole like, where
Mhm.
like Garrett Cole's strikeouts, especially a couple of years ago, his strikeouts and walks were always really good, but sometimes he gave up the long ball. So, yeah, it happens that way sometimes. But yeah, anything more on the Flaherty sweepstakes?
I mean, we could probably talk about destinations. I mean, my original prediction, I believe, was that I had him going to the Rangers. What was yours, if you remember?
I had him go to the Dodgers, which is probably not going to
Okay,
happen.
that's right. Which, yeah, I mean, I think we can probably rule that one out unless the market on him falls enough to where the Dodgers are like, you know what, why not?
Yeah,
Um, which I don't think we could ever rule that out. But
right.
yeah, I had him go to the Rangers. I don't think it's going to happen, but I wouldn't totally rule it out. They've already re-signed Nathan Eovaldi, and they're obviously getting DeGrom back this year. I think they're probably expecting a big step up, or at least more time for Cody Bradford on the mound. I believe the teams ailing him are the Giants, Blue Jays, among others, right?
Um, yeah, Blue Jays and Giants were like the first ones I saw in the Google News headline. So like, yeah, that seems to be the and
There
a
was a
report from Bleacher Nation says Chicago Cubs remain in the mix for Jack Flaherty.
Mark Feinsand wrote on yesterday, actually, the Blue Jays, Cubs, and Giants and Tigers were the teams that among the teams that remained in the mix. So there is definitely still a market out there. Um, the Orioles are also a potential suitor. They've already had Jack Flaherty. I don't know how willing they are to go above whatever that price may be. I believe they may or may not have offered more for Corbin Burns. I don't know if we'll ever fully know that, but there are some rumors saying that there were higher offers on the table and that he very specifically seemed to pick Arizona. So that was, an interesting thing. But I don't know. I think we should probably go through the fits for all these teams. The Tigers, it goes without saying. They know who he is. They know that he can succeed there. They need pitching. It's just, are they willing to go that all out for it, especially when they have other needs, possibly even bigger than the rotation?
Yeah, I would love a reunion with the Tigers because that's clearly where he performed the best. He was, at least in terms of strikeout and walk numbers, he was outdoing second half 2019 Jack Flaherty, which is, like who's an otherworldly pitcher. Um like that is where, he obviously had performed the best there than he had in half a decade. And Tiger, we've never viewed the Tigers as like, some analytical haven, but they do seem to have something figured out. They've developed Tarek Skubal very well. I think they've done pretty well with, some of their starting pitchers, and I think they had an effect on Jack Flaherty that didn't necessarily transfer over to Los Angeles. And I'd really love to see, like, if the Tigers signed him to a 5-year deal, I would be a huge fan of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also have the Blue Jays, the Giants, the Cubs. The Giants, I think, could be very interesting. They're obviously known for their so-called pitching lab, right? I mean, they develop a lot of interesting guys. They sort of revitalize, right? I mean, Kevin Gausman is like kind of the I guess like the holy grail of like guys that, found a lot of untapped potential with the Giants. They obviously kind of have a rotation spot that can be filled, right? It's Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, Jordan Hicks, Kyle Harrison, and then Landon Roop with Keaton Wynn on the IL. They could use another starter if they're trying to be competitive this year. They have money to spend. I think Flaherty has a good space there for sure.
Yeah, no, I like Tigers and Giants for me are the best potential destinations for him, like taking, money out of it, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because and yeah, the Giants should be aggressive. They've two of the last three off seasons, they've lost one of the best pitchers on the market, whether that be Carlos Rodon, or 3 of the past 4 years, they've lost one of the best pitchers on the market, whether it be
Yeah,
Kevin Gausman, Carlos Rodon, or now Blake
Blake
Snell.
Snell.
And they haven't supplemented Snell yet. So, go out and get that, go out and get one of those top of the rotation guys like Flaherty. And specifically why I say Tigers and Giants is because also with a fly ball pitcher, it's less punished in Comerica Park and Oracle Park, and that's demonstrated in the Statcast data. I think he allowed 30 homers last year, and if all games were pitched in Oracle, it would have been 26, and if they were all pitched in Comerica, it would have been 24. So certainly, like, it doesn't have the craziest effect because obviously not all games are pitched at the home ballpark, but it would be less his pitching style would be less of a problem, pitching in those ballparks.
In terms of the Cubs, like if, I don't know what the plan is with Kyle Tucker, if they've had extension talks, if they are really all in on going for that. But if they're not, like they should be going all out this year. They're in a very winnable division, but also a division that hasn't had much success in the playoffs. So winning the division, building a roster that's good enough in is not enough for the Cubs right now because, the last 5 years have shown us like once an NL Central team gets to the playoffs, that's kind of it for them, right? The last team to advance past any round, I believe, was the 2019 Cardinals. Is that right? Am I missing one? I don't think so, right?
No, I don't think you're missing one.
Yeah. So and there's again a rotation spot to be filled. I mean, I don't think Flaherty is the biggest need for this team right now. Maybe probably a relief pitcher, maybe a Tanner Scott. But I mean, Shota Imanaga, Justin Steele, Jamison Taillon, Matthew Boyd, Javier Assad, with some potential pieces, for depth, including Cody Poteet, Jordan Wicks, Caleb Killian, maybe Cade Horton if he's ready at any point this year. Obviously, he's a top pitching prospect. They obviously are very familiar with Flaherty, at least in his younger days. They saw him a lot when he was dominating with St. Louis. I feel like we'll probably have deeper conversations with the Cubs with some other free agents. I want to just throw another team out there. I don't think this team is in the mix. I don't think they're going to be in the mix, and I don't think they're going to sign him. But I feel like it would make a lot of sense. We talked about Jack Flaherty, having a home with the Dodgers, and, we all, like I said he would re-sign in October because, he grew up a Dodgers fan. He's going to be one of those guys where like the Dodgers win the World Series, and they want to bring the team back, and Flaherty's one of those guys. It's not going to happen like that. But there's another team a little not too far away. And one thing that I keep thinking is this time 3 years ago, there was a team in the American League West who was coming off of a 100-loss season at a time where the division was much stronger than it is now, who had some interesting pieces for the future, but still clearly a lot of holes to fill on the roster. They went out and signed $500 million worth of free agents between 2022 and 2021 and 22, and then went out and signed the best pitcher on the market, and then went on to win the World Series in 2 years. I don't know how the Angels aren't looking at that and thinking, why can't that be us? Especially because they've already made some moves this offseason. They've signed Yusei Kikuchi for a 3-year deal. And I don't know, if you're signing a 34-year-old starter that you're probably anticipating right now is going to be your ace, you should probably imagine you're going to get the most of that production in year one, and it's going to go down from there, just naturally, because that's how aging works. We see it all the time in baseball. Why not go get two of these guys? Why not go get Flaherty and then one of the hitters, whether it be a Santander, which I think would be the best fit, maybe a Pete Alonso on a 1+1 if he's willing to take a prove it type of deal. You only have 2 years left on the Rendon deal. There's interesting pieces on this team that they're probably anticipating Zach Neto is a guy that they're going to keep unless they enter another rebuild. Nolan Shawnoel showed some interesting flashes late last season. Christian Moore is coming up. Trout, it's obviously a healthy season from Trout. Seems to be more and more to ask for each year. But he's still there. He's still on the roster. And if he's on the field, you can still expect he's going to be a very good player.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I can't buy into that.
No, I can't buy into it either. It's not going to happen. I just don't understand why they're not being more aggressive with it.
Yeah, what confuses me more is them getting Kikuchi, and
I agree, but they did. So I'm operating under the assumption of they've already done this. Why are they stopping there?
Yeah, I get it's
I don't, if you don't add to this roster any more than you already have, you're not going to be competitive in the next 3 years. You've already signed this pitcher that you probably anticipate is going to be your ace. Like I said, I don't anticipate this is going to happen. I'm just saying, like I really don't understand what they're doing, and this seems like something that they should be jumping on.
Right. Maybe. I would I, I would like dig if all of a sudden it came down to like it is looking like one of those like opt-out deals after 1 year and they
Yeah,
hopped on it so that they could try to get some trade value. Um
basically what the Giants did last year with Chapman and Snell.
yeah, part of me thinks that that's what they might be doing with Kikuchi, even though it's a 3 year deal. Like I can't imagine he finishes that contract with the Angels. Um
Either
so
he
yeah,
does or it becomes like a Tyler Anderson type situation.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I could see them hopping on it if they give him, a pretty front loaded like, 2, 3 year deal with an opt out after the first year. Um, like I could see that, but yeah,
And like to add
yeah,
onto it, like this is probably the weakest the division has been in the last like 10, like since the last time the Angels were good.
that's true. Yeah. So it's not
Like if you're gonna
completely,
if like you've already made one big free agent move, you're a couple away from at least like entering the conversation if enough goes right.
yeah, it's not completely unincentivized to try and like crawl your way out of the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because
Because you're
yeah,
because you're not because you're not developing already.
right, because you may only need 90 wins to win that division
Mm-hmm.
for the next few years or so. Because yeah, Astros have weakened, Mariners can only strengthen up so much. Um, Rangers and A's are who they are. So and yeah, Angels are who they are. So um, yeah, like yeah, it's an interesting topic. Yeah, and I don't know. I guess with the Blue Jays, it seems like they're just kind of. I feel like they're in the mix on
They're just
literally every single person on
they're
the free agent
begging
market.
everyone, they're begging anyone and anything to take their money. Like I think the Blue Jays, the way that they're operating is like they're already operating as if they've already spent this money, but they actually haven't. So they're like, well, we've already put this much money on the table. If we're not going to spend on anything, that's not good. Where can we spend? And they're in on pretty much every big name free agent. I mean, there are definitely a lot of needs on this roster. I think the number one priority should still be finding a way to extend Vladimir Guerrero Jr. because if you're a free agent, why would you want to come to this team for 4 or 5 years if in 1 year Vlad Guerrero Jr. very well might be off the team and also Bo Bichette might also be off the team? Like what exactly does this team have? I know they have, a couple interesting prospects, but they're in the division with, the Orioles that we've been talking about for so long, the Yankees who are the Yankees, the Red Sox who are, one of the best farm systems in baseball, and the Rays who always seem like they're one or two steps away from just randomly surprising people.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, they finished in last place last year.
They did.
Um,
And you look at the way the roster is set right now, I don't think this is how it's going to look on opening day. I think they're going to get one of these guys. Um, but you're asking a lot from a lot of player, right? Like they have Will Wagner, or at least Fangraphs has Will Wagner penciled in as the cleanup hitter right now. You have Ernie Clement, Nathan Lukes, and Joey Loperfido all as starting players. You have Leo Jimenez on the opening day roster. Like you're asking a lot from a lot of people that you can't just bank on it with.
right. Yeah, I get why it's
Like
not the
Kevin
best.
Gosman regressed last year. Barrios and Bassett are still there, and they're not getting any younger. Bowden Francis was interesting, but is that really him? Who knows? And the bullpen was one of the worst in baseball last year.
And according to Fangraphs, they have a bottom 8 farm system.
Yeah,
So there's not really like, oh wait, there's more coming, but yeah, there's not really that situation with Toronto. So yeah, I get why it's not an attractive option, and I feel like if the Blue Jays want a free agent, they have to be the highest bidder, and even sometimes that might not be good enough.
yeah. Well, it wasn't for allegedly Corbin Burns.
Yeah,
I assume they had to have offered Corbin Burns more than the Diamondbacks did.
yeah, I would also
I
have to
would I would
imagine that as
venture
well.
to believe that. Um, yeah, I mean they gotta get one of these guys, and I do think they're going to. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Um,
still, I think you got to re-sign Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Like he's going to be 27 entering that contract. It's going to cost you a lot, but like if you were willing to put the money on the table for Shohei Ohtani last year, well, I don't know what kind of money, but not $700 million, but still more than you would have probably. I would venture to guess they put more on the money, more on the table for Shohei Ohtani than Vladimir Guerrero Jr. will get. Um, and they probably put more on the table for Juan Soto than Vlad Jr. is going to get. I would say do it right now. Uh, like he already set spring training as the deadline. Like get that taken care of. While also figuring out what other free agents are coming because the future of this team looks very bleak, regardless of how the rest of this offseason goes if they don't re-sign Vlad.
yeah, and it's more than just like trying to keep a good player around. It just seems like the connection between Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and the Toronto fan base has been pretty strong even since before he ever entered the major leagues.
Yeah,
There was so like people forget like how hyped he was when he came up in 2019.
which
It
is
was a
crazy
very
that we've forgotten that. I remember it like it was yesterday.
yeah, it was a very big deal. Especially with his father's connection to Montreal and just Canadian baseball in general. It's a yeah, it's kind of a big deal to have him around, and he put up the best first base season out of anyone last year. So yeah, and he's only heading into his age 26 season right now, I think. Um,
Yes.
so so yeah, it's beyond just like keeping a good player around. I think just it would really be diffusing for the Toronto fan base if they did not keep him around. And it would sort of just kind of really deflate the energy of the fan base and probably their passion for the team. So yeah, it would be good for them to keep him around. But yeah,
And I
and
mean, how do you think it looks? I mean, how do you think he feels seeing the Blue Jays, being in on Shohei, being in on Soto, but not giving him the deal that he feels like he deserves? Because clearly they're offering those two guys more. I would have to imagine they are if they're serious about, if they were serious about Ohtani or Soto. It feels like, hey, if you're willing to offer that ridiculous amount of money for those two players, I'm right here and I'm going to cost you less, a lot, sure, but less.
yeah, right.
I don't know.
He's more than likely only going to get more expensive, unless he has a down year this
I
upcoming
mean, they
year.
already missed their chance. Like, they could have done it this time last year when he was coming off of back-to-back down years with still very good metrics.
Yeah, right.
And
Um,
everything finally came more to fruition last year. And now it's okay. Soto just got this deal. I'm young. I just had this great season. And I believe according to MLB trade rumors, the most recent development was that Vlad Jr. set the first day of spring training as the deadline for an extension, which is not what free agents usually do. They usually, do like at the end of spring training, and if I don't have it by opening day, it's not happening. Um, he says he's willing to stay in Toronto if they at the right price. Most recently, it was 340 million, to which he said even close to what he wants. I would imagine it's going to be in the 400, 425, like the Mike Trout range, which again, we keep saying Mike Trout didn't get enough money at the time.
yeah, right.
Um,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, do we want to, um, yeah, do we want to get into the next free agent?
Yeah. Which one? Who do we want to talk about?
I guess it's probably Alex Bregman.
All right. Yeah. Let's talk about Bregman because I think if I had to guess, he's probably the next piece to fall. And he's probably going to get the most total dollars of all the free agents remaining.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. Um, yeah, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of talk about him going to the Red Sox, which obviously serves interesting because they've already signed a third baseman for 11 years, and there's potential talk about Bregman going to second base. What have your thoughts been on the potential of him coming to the hometown team?
It's I'm listening. I don't know if I'm fully bought in as much as a lot of other people. Um, I guess it really depends on what the numbers look like on that contract. Um, because like the Red Sox obviously have two infield prospects coming up. They already have a third baseman locked up. They have a shortstop locked up. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think that should mean you can't sign another player. And Bregman's definitely the guy right now. They definitely need a right-handed hitter. I mean, more than anything else, because unfortunately, you can't really rely on Trevor Story to be that guy. I'm not too in on Ceddanne Rafaela, and Connor Wong is just not. He's not what they're going to ask for. They're asking for like a clear middle of the order bat right-hander that can go over the monster and stuff like that. And Bregman's definitely the best guy out there remaining, so it makes sense that they're in on him. I'm not opposed to a potential contract, although I do worry about maybe a 6, 7 year deal, which could be what he gets. It could not be. I mean, if he really wants to come to Boston, I think even a 5 year deal might do it. Even if there's other teams offering 6 or 7.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And yeah, I think a 5-year deal could suffice because, the days of, being a top five MVP pick, are kind of long behind him. Although he's been a very productive player and very consistent player each of the last 3 years, ever since he's been fully healthy. It's just like you're not buying into the fact that he's going to be necessarily dominating the game when
Mm-hmm.
he's with you, especially as he's on the wrong side of 30. I think he's heading into his age 31 season.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I like with my thoughts on it, especially with it being my favorite team being involved. Yeah, I still find it somewhat questionable, and it could really lead to an unnecessary clog up in the infield, and especially like the Red Sox seem to have been on a budget for the last half decade. So if you are worried about your money, I would rather that be invested in a starting pitcher than an infielder who, like we've said before, would possibly only solve a 2 to 3 month problem with a 5 to 6 year contract. Um, yeah, like considering that Marcelo Meyer and Christian Campbell are coming up, and Story, Devers, and Cassis are already there. I don't know. It just seems like maybe an overreaction to a hole that the Red Sox have in their current roster, but not necessarily their future roster.
I mean, Red Sox fans for years have been watching without any shadow of a doubt and without failure, one of the worst infield defenses in baseball. And Alex Bregman would be a massive, massive upgrade over pretty much anyone else. Especially Devers at third. I think ideally the move should honestly be to figure out a way for Devers to get to be a full-time DH eventually. The Red Sox paid him because he could hit. They never paid him for his defense. I don't think there's any shame in paying X number of dollars for a DH in Rafael Devers' case, because the Red Sox pretty much exclusively signed him for his offensive abilities and his youth. So Bregman, moving to third base, I think it makes more sense to sign Bregman and put him at third than to move him to second. To be honest, obviously you're gonna have to figure out something with Masataka Yoshida in that case, because he's kind of just he just has a weird, he just doesn't really fit on this roster if Alex Bregman comes over. Um, so there is that aspect to it as well. Obviously, you're gonna have to figure out something with the infield logjam. But you also don't know if Meyer and Campbell are going to work out. Like, they are both top 10 prospects on Baseball America. There's a chance one of them just simply doesn't live up to it, and then you have Alex Bregman, who there are obviously reasons for concern, but I think a lot of the stuff that he has a little more control over, he's kept consistent with, right? He's still not striking out. He's still, hitting for contact very well. Like those are usually some signs of an imminent decline. The walk rate did go down last year, which I don't love, but I think that could still find its way back up. But regardless, he's still not striking out at all. I think he, pulls enough where he can find the monster a decent amount, whether it's a double or just over it. Like the fit is certainly there, and I don't think it's the worst possible destination for him specifically to continue being a great hitter.
Yeah, I think just my take on it is like if you're signing someone to as big a deal as Bregman will be getting, or I assume that he will be getting, um, you should be filling a role that's pretty necessary to the team, and will be pretty necessary to the team. And I just don't think this this is necessarily uh a move that is needed right now. Whereas like if the Red Sox went out and got Ha-Seong Kim, it would solve a lot of the issues they have with the current team. You know, he would be able to be a second baseman. He would provide some much needed quality defensive ability in that infield. And he also provides, good enough offense and very good base running. So, and it would be a much less of a financial burden and much less of a much shorter a commitment. Um, so and yeah, and maybe I'm thinking too conservatively, but the Red Sox have been thinking conservatively for the past half decade. So assuming that um they sign Bregman, a lot of other a lot of other current free agents and future free agents come off the board considering the commitment that they would have to go with.
I agree with you on a lot of that. I mean, I think if they don't sign Bregman, I'm probably not going to lose sleep over it. If they do, I'd be happy about it, depending on the price. Um, you mentioned the Red Sox have been conservative over the last half decade, and that is true. It still shouldn't be. It really should. Like, this is not the Red Sox team that we grew up with. It's not the Red Sox team that we, watched win World Series every 5 years or whatever. Like, it doesn't need to be like that. And I know that we're operating off of what we assume we shouldn't have to.
Well, yeah, I mean, but just in terms of decision making, it's all ultimately the owner.
Hmm.
And we like you're limited by you're ultimately limited by your owner. There's a reason why the Guardians and the Pirates are not in on the Alex Bregman sweepstakes is
Yeah.
because they're limited by their owner. I'm sure that their GMs, if given the opportunity, would be interested in him. Maybe not the Guardians because of the third base thing, but yeah, like a team like the Pirates or uh or like the Athletics. Yeah, I'm sure they would be into Alex Bregman if they could afford him. But yeah, with the Red Sox, they've turned into not a small market team,
A
but
mid-market team.
a mid market team. Like I think we mentioned the Diamondbacks are like right behind them in the payroll rankings right now.
Yeah.
Um, so like yeah, I mean, given the fact that they have been budgeted and yeah, if I could flip a switch and make John Henry not care about the luxury tax anymore and not budget as much as he has, I would, and I would probably sign Alex Bregman and another pitcher. But given the
Yeah.
circumstances, Craig Breslow I think is given a certain responsibility to have to make hard decisions. And I think a lot of hard decisions surround the Alex Bregman sweepstakes.
And the other thing of this, like, but of all the teams that are in on Alex Bregman or have been linked to him or rumored to him, whatever, I don't think the Red Sox are under the most pressure to sign him. I think that would fall on the Detroit Tigers. This is a team that I think has to sign a hitter, like at least a middle of the order bat, to look like you're taking the franchise seriously right now. The Red Sox, have still made some legit moves to make themselves better with whether it be the Crochet signing, the solidifying more of the rotation, whatever. But the Tigers, they added Glaber Torres, but that's not, we clearly saw last year they need more consistent offense, and they don't really have it right now. I don't even really understand the Glaber Torres signing fully with the implications that it has for guys like Colt Keith and for guys like Spencer Torkelson. Bregman does make a lot of sense. It might not be he might not be the best version of himself in Detroit, but he's still going to be an upgrade over whatever they have right now, and that's kind of what they need to be looking at going into the 2025 season, having just made the playoffs and started a competitive window.
Um, yeah, and I'm looking at their projected roster. They have Jace Young in the third base slot. I don't know too much about him. He was a first rounder, but I'm in the next couple of years at least, Alex Bregman would probably be an upgrade. So I guess that depends on how the Tigers view Young, and what potential he can bring. Because yeah, if they think they can get production out of him, it wouldn't be completely necessary um, to sign, a long-term guy. I guess
I
this,
don't I don't think I don't think Jace Young should stop the potential Alex Bregman signing.
yeah, no, I wouldn't say
But like
so
I
either.
don't think like I'm sure he can be a very good major leaguer. I don't think it can justify not bringing in that kind of bad when you have the opportunity.
Yeah, I think this all kind of ties back to when we were talking about Bregman in our free agent predictions episode. There was kind of the conclusion that uh, most of the most of the teams that can afford Alex Bregman don't really need him, or they have a third base
Hmm.
position locked up, um, or they're not necessarily seeking someone like Alex Bregman.
Hmm.
Like for example, the Yankees, they don't really have a third base slot open or a third base slot locked down, but they just don't seem to really be in on him. Um, and I don't know, it doesn't feel like they really need him
It's
that
an
much.
interesting thing because I think the three that I would most likely put as his landing spots would be Toronto, Detroit, and Boston. And if you look at those three, I think Toronto is the best fit on both sides. I think Detroit is under the most pressure to sign him, but I also think the Red Sox have an equal chance at both at between them and the other two.
Yeah, the Red Sox can afford him the most,
Yeah,
for
yep.
sure. Um, I guess the Blue Jays have some money too, but
I believe Rogers is the second richest owners in the game behind Cohen.
yeah, that makes sense.
So
But yeah, no, it's certainly interesting. And yeah, the rumors have been swirling for the past few weeks, so I'm curious. I'm curious to see how it goes. I would, and for the record, I wouldn't be devastated if the Red Sox signed Alex Bregman. It would leave me with some questions, and I think it would improve their team for sure. And I'd be curious to see how it shakes up their infield, um, but yeah, it'd be interesting. Anything
mhm.
more on Alex Bregman?
No, who do we want to talk about next?
Maybe Pete Alonso.
All right, we'll do Pete Alonso. I think the Mets reunion is going to happen. I think of all the free agents out there that are like the big names remaining, I think Pete Alonso would probably be the most likely to take that 1+1 sort of deal. Right, he's a Boris guy. Like I don't think he wants to settle for something. Um, and I think the Mets reunion is the most likely, right? Like they are a better team now uh, than they were 2 months ago. Obviously, they signed Juan Soto. There is definitely a need because right now they have Mark Vientos playing first. I think he's better off at third. Um, but that's not how they have him right now. They have Brett Beatty playing third. So I think Pete Alonso bringing him back, it does make the team better. It brings back, a beloved player for the franchise. And it gives him a chance to really, go out there and prove himself. He had the chance last year, didn't do it. It would give him a second chance at it, and I feel like he'd be more likely to take that 1+1 sort of deal than settle for like a 3 or 4 year below market value contract.
Um, yeah, it would certainly make sense, especially given just his general offensive potential. He's hit. I know it was 2019, but he's hit over 50 home runs in a season before, and that was the season where he had a 941 OPS. Um, and yeah, it just seems like when you look at the reports and whatnot, that seems to be what the consensus is out there, and seems to be what makes sense. And yeah, even with the Mets doling out money to Soto and Minaya, they still don't have they still don't have the craziest like payroll right now, oddly enough. Spot
No,
Track has them as the third highest payroll in baseball. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that, Scherzer and Verlander, I think, completely came off the books this this past year, if I'm not mistaken. Because yeah, they signed Verlander in 2023, right?
uh, no, I think it was 2022, right?
I think it was after they made the playoffs. Um,
Oh, the Mets. Yeah, it was after 22. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so yeah, so it's along with adding, Soto to the mix, they also subtracted some contracts. So they could afford, to bring Alonso back. I mean, of course, Steve Cohen can afford virtually anything, but it would not be out of the realm of possibility for him to come back and add to that. And yeah, it would fill a good space because the Mets haven't gone out and found a first base replacement. They don't necessarily have a first base replacement coming up, at least of Alonso's quality or close to Alonso's quality. So yeah, I think and the Mets can afford that. Even if it is a little bit of an overpay, they can afford that. So yeah, I agree it would make sense. I think both our predictions were the Nationals, but there's really been no
They got
ties to the
Nalo,
Nationals.
so I think it's interesting. There's been a lot of shakeup in the first base market this offseason, and a lot of teams that needed a first baseman went a different route other than Pete Alonso. There's definitely, I think, a lot of question marks in terms of who wants him because I don't know. It doesn't. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there is a market for him out there. I think the idea of him taking a 1+1 or like a shorter term prove it type of deal with options opens the door for some other teams. Some that come to mind are like the Mariners. They come to mind for me. Um, Maybe the Twins, but I don't think the Twins would do it. They're looking to sell, and they're also part of the TV mix-up stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Just based on
The
the
Mariners, like
reports,
they've been kind of shockingly quiet considering how much they need another hitter.
right? Yeah. Um,
Like
I mean, they
I don't
always
even hear them like linked to players.
They always need players, and unfortunately, I mean, they have gone out before and gotten hitters,
Hmm.
and a lot of the times it just falls
Hasn't
flat.
worked out.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. Obviously the ballpark has something to do with it, but it can't be that extreme. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I don't have too much to say on the Pete Alonso
It really
switch.
isn't. I don't know. I just think like it's got to be the Mets, right?
Um, yeah, probably.
I would have to venture to guess that it's the Mets. They give him 1 year. He already declined the qualifying offer, so they give him 1 year, like I don't know, 23 million with a either a player, maybe with like a $30 million player option or something. Actually, no, I don't think they do that. Maybe
Yeah,
like a little like a $16 million player option.
right. I'm looking at what is this report from the U.S. Sun? This seems like not real. But it's the first thing that came up um on Google News. Also, the headline of Google News says Angels reportedly interested in Pete Alonso.
Though I thought it was they were like interested, like they were considering a pursuit of him. That was the wording on it, right?
Uh, probably. Or
Which like I don't know
yeah,
why. I think it's crazy that you're weighing a pursuit of a free agent in January.
yeah. This is
That should be done in like September at the latest, honestly.
right. Yeah,
Like like the Angels should be either saying, all right, if Pete Alonso's market goes down this much, this is where we're gonna get in on it.
right. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I don't know.
but
Like it's probably going to be the Mets. I think it makes the most sense. Like it's good for both sides. I think it's the most realistic. I don't think the Mariners and Twins have the positional need and the flexibility to do so, and the willingness to win, or at least the Pete Alonso puts them in a better position to win. I just don't think they're going to do it.
um, yeah. It would make a decent amount of sense, and considering that it doesn't seem like he's going to get the big deal that everyone thought he would get, as time just keeps going on, um, it seems like it would just be comfortable enough for the Mets for sure.
I do
Um,
wonder. He declined a $158 million contract from the Mets earlier this year. I don't know if he's going to get that much this year. My guess would be no.
mhm.
Like, I wonder if that contract was signed. And the answer to this is almost certainly no, but I can't help but think. I wonder if that changes like the limit they were willing to go on Soto.
Um, yeah,
My guess is no, it probably doesn't. But I do
yeah,
wonder how different things would be with the Mets if Pete Alonso accepted that extension.
yeah. No, it would definitely shake up the makeup of everything. There's potential that maybe like Soto would be still considered, but like a re-signing of someone like Manaya would be harder because I would
Hmm.
imagine that
Yeah,
Alonso,
Manaya is probably the more affected player there.
yeah, like Alonso, at least annually would probably make as much as Manaya um
Because
in this
the Mets still
new
like they
contract.
definitely have a hole on the diamond without Alonso.
Yeah, yeah, because Brett Beatty has not formed into
No.
what they anticipated he would, unfortunately. Um, and I get, things can change, but as of now, it just doesn't seem like a reason to put him on a playoff contending team, to try and develop him more. He's heading into age 25 season, which is still young, but not necessarily something where you're like, oh, just wait till it happens because there's a possibility it just won't happen. So,
Hmm.
especially with the Mets and the position they've put in, which is, once they signed Juan Soto, they kind of said to everyone like, we are World Series contenders. Um, you know, you gotta act like it. So, and I'm not saying that the Mets aren't, but they will. An Alonso deal would certainly add to that, especially considering what he did in the postseason last year. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, anything more before we get into the next, what is it? Santander's the last one?
Santander, then Tanner Scott.
Oh yeah, I guess Tanner Scott. Um, yeah, Santander, I think I predicted him going to the Yankees. Where
I
did you have
predicted
him
him
go?
going to where did I have him going? I think I had the Mariners, but I could be wrong on that. Anthony, I
Yeah.
had the Royals.
That I mean it would still certainly make sense.
It would make sense. Who have they added much this way? They added Jonathan India, but nothing to the outfield,
Nothing to the outfield, and
which could use some.
they had bad
Yeah,
outfield production last year.
yeah. I don't know. I haven't really heard them linked to him at all.
No, no. It says, yeah, on the Google News tab, um, it says Toronto Blue Jays make offer to Anthony
This is
Santander.
the one that I think the Blue Jays will get. I think it makes like obviously the Blue Jays have a shorter right field. Santander is a guy that has a good pull rate on his fly balls. Um, all of his expected numbers are always below the surface level numbers, but that's because he pulls the ball a lot. He would be nicely aided in Toronto there. He's an upgrade over what they have. It's probably what like a 3-4 year deal.
Um, yeah, I would imagine like yeah, probably four. I think it would earn four just because like he has a consistent track record, which I think teams value when
Santander is
considering longer term deals. So
John Heyman
um
reported that he is looking for 5 years and at least 100 mil.
yeah, I don't think I'll get to five
I don't
necessarily,
think so
especially,
either.
I guess he's only heading into his age 30 season. Um but yeah, he's not a five. He doesn't. When I think Anthony Santander, I don't think 5 year deal type player.
Because the
Um,
position player market has really not been that crazy outside of Juan Soto this offseason. Like
um,
Christian Walker got less than I thought,
that's
right?
true. That's true. Um, there just
Bregman's
hasn't been
holding
a whole.
out, Alonso's holding out, Santander's holding out.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's been a whole lot out there. In terms of
Teoscar got, I guess, a decent contract, but like nothing crazy.
yeah. Whereas like pitchers have kind of been
Yeah.
surprising. I guess like Eovaldi getting a $75 million deal. That was kind
Mhm.
of surprising. Um,
Yeah, I think Santander goes to the Blue Jays. But there's definitely a lot of fits out there. But I think this is I mean the Blue Jays are a fit for really everyone. They're just trying to get someone to take their money. I think Santander is the one that's going to do it, but I also think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, they certainly like yeah, their outfield looks pretty incomplete right now. Part of that has to do with I think Dalton Varsho is
Varsho's hurt.
he's going to start the year on the IL. Like he had a
Yeah.
surgery late last year. So you
Springer
know, he'll come
regressed.
back, he'll improve that, but you know, you got Springer who's heading into age, his
35.
35 season,
Mhm.
um, and you know, only has 2 years left on his deal anyway. So even if he was producing at a high level, it's you know, he won't be on the team for much longer. Um, and yeah, it's Nathan Lukes and Joey Loperfido. And yeah, there's some Loperfido optimism for sure, but yeah, you want to add more to the outfield and add more options because
Yeah.
also there's a DH thing there. So, you know, you can put Santander or someone else at DH too. So,
Not only
um,
that, but like the best Blue Jays teams mash on offense. The
true.
Blue Jays team, like ever, it's like a ridiculous lineup. And Anthony
Yeah.
Santander, at least surface still level stats wise, would do that.
Yeah, and they don't really have a dominant starting staff anymore.
No, especially with
So
Gosman taking a step back last year.
yeah, and Barrios just not really living up to previous expectations. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Blue Jays are in a little bit of a limbo right now, but a Santander acquisition probably helps with that. Because yeah, I predicted he would go to the Yankees, and that's considering that they got Bellinger,
Not gonna
um,
happen.
probably not going to happen. Um, and it's not out of the realm of possibility because they did lose two outfielders. They lost Soto and Verdugo, but so yeah, they got what Judge Bellinger and who's the third outfielder that they're supposed to
Dominguez.
have? Oh yeah, yeah. So they're set.
Yeah, with
But
Stan at DH.
it was Stanton at DH. So yeah, Yankees don't need him. But yeah, Blue Jays would be a fit. And I don't know what other teams might be linked to him. Um,
Uh, I believe the Angels were described as front runners, uh, according to the Detroit Free Press.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
maybe I'm onto something.
Well, we're really in a dead zone here, considering all the rumors that are the not only the rumors but the variety of rumors. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. Do we want to? Are we good with rumors? Do we want to get into our next top 10?
Should we talk a little bit about Tanner Scott?
Oh, yeah, I keep forgetting
Yeah.
about Tanner Scott.
Yeah.
Um,
I would imagine, I believe the rumor that came out yesterday was he's looking for, I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before that. He's looking for Clay Holmes money, or that was Jeff Hoffman. Never mind. Jeff Hoffman was looking for Clay Holmes money, um, which means, and that was, what was that contract? 2 years, 36 mil?
that Hoffman got
No,
or
that Clay Holmes got. Yeah, three
three
years,
and
38. Three
yeah.
years, 38. So you figure Scott's probably looking for 4 years and what, like 20-ish mil a year.
Um,
I believe it was like sort of hater money was what he was looking for, which I don't think he's going to get 5 years and 95 mil. But
yeah. Yeah, and it looks like there's predictions of him going to the Dodgers.
I
Um,
really,
or at least that's what the latest news is. Um, which honestly would kind of make sense.
it would.
Because yeah, I mean they um
Evan Phillips
they
was hurt
haven't
last year.
yeah, they haven't really had the I mean yeah, Phillips was good a couple years ago, but um he didn't necessarily dominate last year. They had Walker Buehler close out the World Series for them. So it wasn't like they were really high on a closer to go out there and finish the job off for them. Um, so uh so yeah, I think in the Dodgers can certainly afford a big reliever contract. Like I think the
You can stop at sentence after a Ford.
yeah. Well, I'm just saying I think
Yeah, but you're right.
the
Yes.
the financial discrepancy or there's a smaller group of teams that can go out and just get a big reliever considering they I think they get high contracts disproportionate to their, actual value on the field. Like
Mhm.
Edwin Diaz is making about 20 million a year, and like he's gonna max out at like 3 F4 for a season, and that would be an excellent reliever season.
I know
Um,
they've already been active this offseason, especially in the reliever market, but I could see them tripling down on this one. What if the Yankees just go out and build a Tanner Scott, Devin Williams, Luke Weaver, Fernando Cruz back end of the bullpen?
and that would take me back to what, 2015, 2016.
Yeah, like the Dellin Miller Chapman days.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be
This is
huge.
actually where I would like to see the Red Sox spend some money. I would care to see not Liam Hendricks closing out games next year with Aroldis Chapman.
Yeah, it would be a solid addition for sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'd
Maybe the
be
Phillies. The Phillies have also been too quiet. That was my original prediction.
yeah, and they don't have
They got
often.
Jordan Romano, which I guess could be a closer, but it just doesn't seem very Phillies like. Or it seems exactly Phillies like is one of the two. It's very Dombrowski like for sure.
Yeah, my prediction was he would go to the Rangers, and I don't
That
think
makes sense too.
the Rangers haven't really added much to their bullpen, I don't think. And
They've
they
added nothing to
had
their bullpen.
among like
Well, actually, no, Jacob Webb
among teams that could contend this year, they might have the
and
worst
Robert
bullpen
Garcia. Yeah,
of that
it's
group.
pretty close.
Like I think they were bottom five in bullpen ERA last year, and all the other teams were like, Angels, White Sox, or teams of that,
I don't know if we're
quality.
counting the Blue Jays as contenders, but that would be a close
Yeah,
second.
yeah. So the Rangers could certainly use, like, there's a reason why the consensus was they were going to get Josh Hader 2 off season, or what, 1 off season ago.
Yeah.
Um, and it never ended up happening, and um they should, even if it's not Hater, they should get a really quality bullpen arm, because um they don't have many of them.
Yeah.
So I still think that Rangers should go out and try and pursue him. And I think they've done a decently good job this past off season. Like, getting Eovaldi back was a good move in my opinion. They just got Jock Peterson. They they acquired Jake Berger. Like, they've made some productive moves, but their biggest hole is still their bullpen, and I don't think they've taken the proper steps to try and supplement that.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, Red Sox would be cool. I predicted that Carlos Estevez was going to go to the Red Sox because it was like secondary enough to where the Red Sox would try and get him instead of, one of the top relievers. But yeah, I think that would be a good move. Even like actually, I mean, Felix Bautista's coming back, so a reunion with the Orioles wouldn't necessarily be um
Yeah.
completely necessary. Uh, but yeah, anything more on that on his market?
No, I think we can get into our top 10 list.
Yeah, so if you've missed it before, we have done two top 10 positional lists for the 2025 season. We did the top 10 first baseman in baseball a couple weeks ago, and then last week we did the top 10 center fielders. This week we are doing the top 10 catchers in baseball. And yeah, just for reference, um, we break down what we think they will do for 2025. It's not necessarily a review of what they have done, but what we think they will do. And, we will use what they have done in order to provide context to what we think they will be able to do. But because that's very important. But, I think there's somewhat more of a value on youth and underlying numbers, like expected numbers and stuff like that.
Defense,
Um,
especially.
yeah, average exit velocity, strikeout rate, walk rate, all that stuff. So yeah, with that context, who is your number 10 catcher for 2025?
Yeah, I'd like to start by saying this was a very difficult list to put together for me. I don't know what your experience was like, but I was considering 7 different guys for my 8 through 10 spots.
Yeah, my number 10 was very hard to fill out for me.
My 8 through 10 was It took me like an hour to come to a final conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for number 10, I have one of the 7 returners that I have on this list. He was number 6 for me last year, has fallen to number 10, but consider the amount of competition he was with, he did stay on the list. I'm talking about Will Smith from the Los Angeles Dodgers. In earlier years, he probably would have been top 3 at the very least. 6 for me last year. I was a little bit more down on him than some. And this last year, he did regress a bit on offense and didn't show us a ton on defense. But regardless, I still think he's a top 10 catcher in the game heading into next year. He is very good on many of the hitting fronts, right? I mean, he first of all, I love his fly ball rate. He had a 40% fly ball rate last year, and he also became just the second player since 2008, which this is on Baseball Savant, so essentially since the start of baseball history, according to Baseball Savant, to have multiple seasons with 300 plus batted balls and a 40% fly ball rate. Only him and Alfonso Soriano have done that since 2008. So I like that Will Smith plays obviously in a hitter friendly ballpark. I like that he puts up that kind of crazy fly ball rate. It led him to 20 home runs last year. I think he's capable of more. But on top of that, he had a good sweet spot rate last year, was at 38%. Didn't strike out a lot, walked a decent amount. Hit the ball, continued to be a very good offensive catcher. Clearly a catcher where offense is his biggest strong suit. He wasn't quite there defensively. He was actually the worst framer in the league, according to StatCast, or at least first percentile. Not very good at blocking either, but he does have a very good throwing arm. That is definitely a plus for him defensively. There is, obviously the offense kept him here. He's been one of the most consistent offensive hitters, even if the total production has gone down a bit over the years, but it's still enough for him to stay in the top 10 for me. So I have Will Smith. He was my number 6 last year. He's my number 10 this year.
Yeah. He's Will Smith is kind of a weird thing because he had so much potential. Obviously, he displayed a lot of potential back in like 2020, 2021. We figured he would be maybe the standard for catchers, and he hasn't been bad, obviously. It's just not necessarily up to, the top echelon of catchers like we potentially expected. And we interrupt this segment a little bit because I made a little bit of mistake that I didn't realize until I revealed my number number 9 catcher in baseball. I mistakenly originally had Wilson Contreras in my list, and I totally missed that he is moving to first base this upcoming year. I just when I saw on the Fangraphs projected roster that he was going to be at first base, I just assumed it was kind of an error, and they were going to have that other catcher, Ivan Herrera, kind of like in and out of the catcher position, while William Contreras would kind of platoon and stay mostly at catcher. But apparently, yeah, he's not going to be a catcher, so he is not in either of our lists. But I originally had him in the list, which kind of messed up the order of things. So I originally had my number 9, or my number 9 is my number 10, and my number 8 is my number 9. So my number 11 was not in this list, but I will talk about who now in my updated list is my number 10, and that is Gabriel Moreno, he has been consistently above average offensively and defensively for his whole career, which has been a 3-year career. And that is exemplified by him having at least a 103 OPS plus and +3 defensive run value every year that he has been in the league. And then on the underlying side of things, his expected WOBA has increased every year of his career. And he had amazing strikeout and walk numbers last year. He and Mookie Betts were the only players last year to be 90th percentile or higher in both strikeout and walk rate. So pretty unbelievable in that respect, and shows that there's some good offensive upside along with his already pretty established very good defense. So yeah, kind of sneaking in. Also should be mentioned that He is only going into his age 25 season, so youth definitely on his side, and there's definitely room for him to flourish even a little bit more. So yeah, Gabriel Moreno is my number 10. And yeah, just because my list was wrong, um, I tried to make some edits in and make things make a little bit more sense, but who ended up being my number 9 maybe references my number 10, and who ended up being my number 8 maybe references my number 9. But yeah, trying to make it as the least amount of confusion possible. But in my updated list, Gabriel Moreno gets number 10. Who's your number 9?
Yeah, number 9, I have a newcomer to the list. I talk all the time about how if there's a great defensive player, I say things like, oh, he only needs to be average offensively. And I say that, sometimes in hypothetical sense, but Gabriel Moreno has kind of been that in the 3 years that we've seen him as a catcher. We haven't quite seen him play a full season yet, but I'm still very excited to see what that could look like if he stays healthy. He's put up a 730 OPS or higher in each of the 3 seasons that he's appeared in the majors so far, which is exactly what I mean when I say if he can just be an average offensive hitter, the defense will make him a very solid option. And not to mention, he also happens to be a very good base. Only qualifying catcher in 2024 to put up an above average batting run value, base running run value, and fielding run value in 2024. So he definitely has a bit of a diverse skill set. The defense is very strong. He's a good framer. He also has a very good throwing arm. He's been consistently on top of the pop time leaderboards in the time that he's been a catcher. Additionally, the strikeout and walk numbers are very solid. He has 90th percentile chase rate, K rate, and walk rate, while also maintaining in the top 20% in whiff rate as well. The results have been a little average. The batted ball distribution isn't exactly my favorite, but there are improvements being made. He had a 55% ground ball rate in 2023. It went down below 50% in 2024. He had a 16% fly ball rate. It went up to 21%. It's still not where exactly I'd like to that he provides. I think that's enough for me to justify having a lot of optimism for him going into 2025. Like I said, we still haven't really seen a full season out of him. I'm hoping that we can see that this year, at least enough to qualify for the batting title. I'd very interested to see what he could do in 500, in 2 plate appearances of work. I could see him as a 3 to 4 win catcher potentially, and I'm putting him at number 9 on my list. So Gabby Moreno is making the cut for me.
Right. At my number 9, I've got Alejandro Kirk. Alejandro Kirk is heading into his age 26 season, and although he hasn't progressed like we thought he would after 2022, he is still 9th among catchers in F4 over the last 2 years. And this is largely because he has the 3rd highest defensive runs above average among catchers, while sustaining fairly average offense. I think he has a 95 or somewhere in the mid 90s for weighted runs created plus over the last 2 years. And, catcher isn't necessarily the most offensively dominant position. Um, so, yeah, and also there's some encouraging things under the surface with him. He increased his average exit velocity by 1.8 miles per hour from 2023 to 2024, and also had 58th percentile expected WOBA, which isn't, it's not the craziest brag, but he was above average in terms of the expected stats that considered, strikeout rate, walk rate, quality of contact, and all that. And it shows that he has the potential to be an above average hitter while also being one of the best defensive catchers in baseball. And part of the reason why he wasn't necessarily at the top of his offensive game last year was he was the 14th unluckiest out of 261 in WOBA and expected WOBA. So I expect some of those underlying things to take shape and create some good offensive results while also maintaining that consistent defense that we've seen out of him. I think, not only has he been, not only has he had, a great showcase of fielding, but it's been, I feel like, every year since he's gotten consistent playing time behind the plate. Yeah, if you look at the past 3 years, and his his catching run value. It's plus 12 in 2022, plus 8 in 2023, plus 14 in 2024. So that's been consistent. He showed that he could be a great offensive player in 2022. Hasn't been quite the same the past 2 years, but I think has shown the potential to at least be above average at the plate. Who do you have at number 8?
Yeah, so at number 8, I actually have your number 10. I also put Alejandro Kirk on my list because the defense was too good to ignore for me, and I remain optimistic that he can improve to some degree, at least on offense. Yeah, like you mentioned, 20 defensive runs above average last year, 37.8 over the last 2 years, and doing some quick math here, 49% or 49 defensive runs above average over the last 3 years. One of the best defensive catches that we've seen on a pretty consistent basis now. And I think last year was kind of the tale of two different seasons for him. Just to give you an idea, from March through June, he struggled offensively. I believe finished the month of June with a 587 OPS on the season. That came with a 225 BABIP. And if you know Alejandro Kirk, you know that he keeps the ball on the ground, is a line drive hitter, doesn't really hit a ton of fly balls, which obviously you don't want him hitting ground balls either. But regardless, from March through June, Kirk was the 15th unluckiest hitter by expected batting average and the 23rd unluckiest hitter by expected slugging among the 300 hitters with at least 150 plate appearances. And a lot changed after that, because from July 1st through the end of the season, he slashed 282, 338, 397 for a 735 OPS and a 308 BABIP. That's kind of exactly who we want Alejandro Kirk to be offensively. That's kind of exactly what he has to be maybe even, rise on this list for both of us, with the defense being as good as it is. And you touched on the defense earlier, so I won't go too deep into it. But in terms of what changed, from March through June, 15% of the fly balls and line drives that Alejandro Kirk hit were pulled, and that number rose to 25% from July to September. So we went from 15% of fly balls and line drives pulled to 25% between the first 3 months of the season to the last 3 months. He went from hitting 388 and slugging 592 on these fly balls and line drives to hitting 500 and slugging 789 on them in between this time. So he definitely showed some offensive regression throughout the season last year. If he can be a little closer to that July through September version of himself offensively, I think he can have a really solid season, coupling that with the defense. And for me, it was good enough to make the list, and I have him at number 8.
At my number 8, I have Will Smith. He was my number 5 last year. And yeah, like he's been good, but yeah, he's been good but not great necessarily. He's heading into his age 30 season, so he's actually kind of one of the older players maybe on this list. And he ranked 10th among catchers in 2024 in FWAR and ranked 6th in 2023. He's had a 116 OPS plus each of the past 2 years, and he tied a career low in fielding run value this past year. So that unfortunately trended in the wrong direction. Could be an outlier, but it was, he's never necessarily been a dominant defensive catcher in terms of, accumulating run value and things like that. But it was the worst it's been, in a while for him on the defensive side of the ball, and he was not necessarily dominant on the offensive side of the ball either. He had a 116 OPS plus, which is good enough to get on this list, but not necessarily be among the top. So yeah, he's still a very productive catcher, and I think will continue to be a top 10 catcher in baseball this year, but definitely, I don't consider him in the same echelon as I would have probably a few years ago. What is your number 7?
At number 7, I actually have this same guy at my number 7 from last year. I think the exact same of him this year as I did last year. No, not really, but I have Francisco Alvarez remaining in my 7th spot. Obviously, wasn't exactly the season I was hoping for, but I think the potential sort of remains. He did get injured last year, Some of his offensive numbers, at least the batted ball metrics, took a bit of a hit. He declined in stuff like barrel rate and average exit velocity and sweet spot rate, and various other things. But I still think the potential that he has, coupled with defense, is very good. Talking more specifically about the defense, he's been one of the better framers in the league since he's been in the league, and it continued last year with 7 framing runs despite missing a month and a half. And he ranked on Fangraphs specifically. He ranked 24th in innings caught, 9th in framing on Fangraphs, 10th on Baseball Savant. So he jumped up a bunch of other catchers in framing that played a lot more than him last year. Obviously, that's something that you accumulate. But the power numbers, I believe, are still there. The potential is still there. I don't love that he upped his ground ball rate by 6% last year and dropped his fly ball rate by 11%. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I'm willing to chalk that up to whatever the injury was. He did. He was hitting the ball a lot better as the season went on last year. So I really feel like after he came back from the injury last year, he was probably still not his 100% best self. Just to give you an idea, the average exit velocity specifically, it was 84. It was 84 miles an hour and 86 miles an hour in July and August, and then 92 miles an hour in September. So I do think we have a good chance of seeing the old Francisco Alvarez come back, offensively speaking, while remaining the same on defense. And I'm keeping him in my number 7 spot for that reason.
Yeah. At my number 7, I have someone who was on my list and is rising up the list. Another young catcher. It is Yainer Diaz, who was my number 10 last year, opened up my list last year. And yeah, just kind of kept things somewhat similar to what he did the year before, except did it in a greater sample size and just kind of prove that he is here to stay and here to keep producing. He's only heading into his age 26 season, and he ranks 7th among catchers in F4 over the last 2 years. So it kind of makes sense that he is number 7. Out of 38 catchers with 500 plus plate appearances over the last 2 years, Diaz has the second highest OPS among the current catchers and the highest slugging among them as well. Also, his expected numbers have been 75th percentile or higher each of the last 2 years. So his offensive upside is there for sure. His general offensive production did go slightly down, but it was still very good. Had a 118 OPS plus last year, and also is not necessarily a detriment as a defensive catcher as well. So yeah, he's very productive at the plate. The underlying metrics prove that he should be very productive at the plate. And he's also still got, some good youth on his side. So I believe he is the number 7 catcher in baseball. Who do you have at number 6?
Yeah, at number 6, I have my third and final newcomer to the list. I'm talking about Austin Wells from the New York Yankees. I'm putting him in my number 6 spot. He, again, he was, in the end, had an average offensive season, but a phenomenal defensive season. But even that came after a bit of a slump to end the season. He was rocking kind of like a high 700s, low 800s OPS for a while there, and was atop some of the F4 leaderboards over certain spans. In the end, he finished with 3.4 Fangraphs wins above replacement in just 115 games in his rookie season. So, I thought that was pretty cool. I love that he did that. And some of the walk rate was very good, 11.4% on the walk rate. I like that a lot. Talking more specifically, though, about the defense, he ranks 3rd among all catchers in framing runs with 12 on Baseball Savant. He ranks 13th among all players and 4th among catchers in fielding run value. He was in the 96th percentile for that. The defense was just phenomenal. The barrel rate was also very good. It was 9.1%. The expected WOBA was at 339. So those were above average. There's certainly a lot of potential there for the offense, but the defense is just magnificent. And another guy, I mentioned this with Alejandro Kirk, but the pulled fly ball rate, the percent of fly balls pulled went up throughout the season. It was 12.5% from March through May, 33.3% from June through July, and 40.6% from August through September. And the exit velocity wasn't quite there in August through September, which is why you didn't see the results, but the timing was there. I do believe that Austin Wells can put together a really nice full season with this fantastic defense. And then obviously the offense, I think, has a chance to improve itself. Some of the underlying things I think definitely did throughout the course of this season. So I'm putting him in my number 6 spot to debut on the list.
Right, right. Yeah. I'm gonna match you with that because I have Austin Wells at
Mm-hmm.
number 6 as well. Yeah, he was very impressive, especially at certain points throughout the year last year. Ended up being a Rookie of the Year finalist. So good on him for that. And yeah, he was another newcomer to my list. He is heading into his age 25 season. Obviously, with him being a rookie last year, has youth on his side, and yeah, he finished fourth in F4 among catchers last year, and that is despite having the 15th most plate appearances. So usually there's a correlation between playing time and how much wins above replacement you accumulate. So the fact that he was able to be top four despite not having a crazy amount of playing time. That shows that his season was very impressive last year. And yeah, a lot of that had to do with his defense. He put up plus 13 StatCast defensive run value and also had a 103 OPS plus at the plate. So yeah, it's a good recipe for success. Just holding your weight on the offensive side while also being an excellent defender. That's what a lot of these catchers kind of do on this list. And yeah, he was 60th percentile or higher in expected WOBA, expected slugging, barrel rate, bat speed, chase rate, and walk rate. He did underperform his expected numbers a little bit, so there is hope that there is potential for him to produce a good amount more offensively, which brings him up this list a little bit more as well. So yeah, there's a lot of potential with Austin Wells, or at least he displayed that this past year, and especially with him heading into his age 25 season, there's a lot of possibilities for him. So yeah, he's number 6 on this list. Who do you have at number 5?
At number 5, I put the guy that I put at the top of this list last year, my number 1 catcher of 2024, is now my number 25 in 2025. I'm talking about Sean Murphy. It was a rough 2024 for Sean Murphy, one that he certainly wants to forget. Not only did he spend a lot of the year on the injured list, but when he was on the field before and after the injury, he just wasn't himself, quite simply. There's a lot of different things you can point to in terms of what went wrong, whether it be just the offense in general. He took a major dip in ISO, strikeout rate went up, walk rate went slightly down. The BABIP went quite far down as well. And then in terms of all this the StatCast stuff, he lost 3.5 miles per hour in average exit velocity. He lost 13% in sweet spot rate. He gained 12% in ground ball rate, and lost 12% in line drive rate. So you might ask yourself, why is he still number 5 on this list? Well, I think the potential is still there. The defense was still there to a certain degree last year. And additionally, I do think there was some misfortune. Sean Murphy was the 12th unluckiest hitter by expected batting average and the 6th luckiest in expected slugging against four-seam fastballs among the 400 hitters with at least 50 plate appearances ending on four-seamers. He slugged .952 on hard hit four-seamers, but had a 1401 expected slugging, making him the 3rd unluckiest hitter. So I do think there is some room for a comeback offensively for Sean Murphy. I think that a lot of those crazy, decreases or increases in all those stats that I mentioned are probably going to neutralize themselves in 2025. I think the sweet spot rate will go back up. I think the average exit velocity will go back up. I think the line drive rate will go back up. The ground ball rate will go back down. The pull rate's still very good. He pulled over 50% of his batted balls last year and had over a 30% rate of fly balls that were pulled. Like I mentioned, the defense is still there as well. And, there was just a weird injury bug going on with the Braves all of last year. I would imagine that probably won't carry to the same degree into 2025. So I'm keeping Sean Murphy on this list, and I'm keeping him in my top 5.
Right, right. Yeah, and once again we have the same guy at number we have the same guy at number 5, the same way we did at number 6. Yeah, Sean Murphy, he was my number 2 catcher last year. And yeah, he is coming off a big down year. Right now he's heading into his age 30 season, and he just came off a year where he only played 72 games, and he suffered career lows in average on base percentage, slugging, OPS, OPS plus, and average exit velocity, along with all expected categories. And his OPS plus went from 127 to 76 because of all that, from 2023 to 2024. However, despite that, crazy down year, he still ranks sixth in F4 among catchers over the last 2 years, just because of how great he was in 2023. So yeah, he's most likely not that version of himself in 2024. And considering the injuries that may have played a factor in his lack of production last year, I still have to bring him down the list because of last year did happen. But still, I still am optimistic about his potential for next year. He, as you mentioned, he had a little bit of lack of luck in the batting department as well. So yeah, I think in a healthy 2025, he can be, a pretty productive catcher still this upcoming year. And, I could see potential for him just kind of getting back to that previous form that, we were considering him a top two, potentially best catcher in baseball. Who do you have at number four?
At number four, I have a guy that was my number 8 last year and is still number 1 in my heart. I'm talking about Patrick Bailey, who is, the gold standard for catcher defense in today's game. Uh, yeah, what number 4? I thought putting him at number 8 last year was like I'm being bold with this one. Number 4 this year, I think, is weirdly appropriate when you're considering offense and defense appropriately. Patrick Bailey is the best defensive catcher in the game. There is no debate over that. He has 62 defensive runs above average in the 1.5 years, the 218 games that he has played in the major leagues so far. He is one of just 18 catchers dating all the way back to 2002 with 30 defensive runs saved and 40 framing runs on Fangraphs. Again, one of 18 catchers in the last 22 years, 23 years, and it took him a year and a half to get on that list. He has the fewest innings caught among those 18 catchers by nearly 1,300 innings, equivalent to 144 games. Patrick Bailey is, quite the defensive catcher, and amazingly, he doesn't even need to be an average offensive hitter because he has not been. He has a career 79 weighted runs created plus. He was at 81 last year. I hope to hear his name called by you a little bit later. He had 4.3 Fangraphs wins above replacement last year, despite an 81 weighted runs created plus. It obviously takes a masterful defensive performance to do that. But I actually do think the offense could still be there, and it was there for a large part of last season. He was around the 100 weighted runs created plus mark for the first half of the season, and he had a 30% line drive rate last year. But he went through a major slump in the month of August where he hit like 040. And the expected numbers were obviously better than that, but that slump did happen, and thus it probably did cost him a couple spots on my list because of it. But regardless, I have Patrick Bailey in my 4 spot. I think with an average offensive season, he could even rise on this list. But right now, I'm going to have to go ahead and assume the offense is going to stay the same. But the defense is just too good to ignore. He is my number 4.
Right. Yeah. My number 4 is who I put as the top catcher in baseball last year. It is Adley Rutschman, who is heading into his age 27 season. And yeah, I'm surprised, if you told me this is where I'd be putting him in 2025, I'd be surprised. But yeah, he progressed in the wrong direction the past year. From 2023 to 2024, his OPS plus went from 128 to 107. His defensive run value on StatCast went from +8 to 0. And his expected WOBA went from the 93rd percentile to the 47th percentile. So yeah, I mean, just in general, I'm kind of relying on his upside because he did not have a top 5 catcher season last year. But I have him in the top 4 here. It's just, considering what he's done, what he did in his rookie season and the year after, I have to consider that upside and what he brings to the table. And I do believe that he will improve from 2024 to 2025. But his unfortunate season and his general regression in kind of all areas last year, made me, bring him down this list. But yeah, he has youth and he has talent on his side. Just kind of needs to show what he can do in order to rise back up the list. But yeah, I'm still pretty confident in him. He's still at the number 4 spot, but I'm definitely not as confident in him as I was last year. Who do you have at number 3?
Yeah, number 3. This is where I put Adley Rutschman. So we're back-to-back segments on him. I had him in my number 2 spot last year, so he is only falling 1 spot for me. I don't know. I do think that he can get back to what he was, which is a 5-win catcher. The defense did go down, the offense went down, pretty much everything went down for him, but a lot of the peripherals in some ways stayed the same. His strikeout rate, he only went up by 1.4%, not a meaningful enough number to cause any sort of concern. The walk rate did go down by a considerable amount. But like average exit velocity, he stayed the same. Distribution of power, he stayed the same. Percent of fly balls pulled, he actually decreased quite considerably in ground ball rate and increased in fly ball rate, which I think is pretty cool. And he increased in pull rate too. So there's a lot of metrics that I think could indicate he finds himself a little bit more in 2025 if things stay the same. I tried to look if there was any sort of injury that he was playing through or any just sort of underlying reason why this slump was happening. Mike Elias said it was just general fatigue from playing catcher every day. So maybe they'll have him DH more. Maybe put James McCann back there a little bit more in 2025. But regardless, I think Adley will find his way back to at least being closer to what he was. I don't think he's going to be a low 700s OPS guy again, because all of it really happened in the last half of the season, right? Like he had an 830 OPS, I believe it was, going into the month of July. And everything just kind of fell apart those last few months of the season. And I think he's going to be closer to what we know about him in 2025. So he is remaining in my number 3 spot.
Right, right. Yeah. My number 3 is your number 4. It is Patrick Bailey, who I had at number 9 in 20 for the 2024 season. And yeah, Patrick Bailey, definitely has youth on his side. He's heading into his age 26 season. He finished 3rd in F4 among catchers in 2024, and he ranks 4th among them over the last 2 years. And he led all fielders in StatCast, all fielders, no matter position, in StatCast fielding run value by 5 runs last year. It was 22. He had 22. The next most was 17. And over the last 2 years, he leads all fielders in defensive runs above average by 22.6. I mean, that is a crazy significant number. So in terms of, fielding run value and defensive value, it's Patrick Bailey and it's everyone else. So, there's that factor. That's what brings him up the list so much. And I think why I may have him higher than you do is because I do believe that there is a lot of merit in those expected numbers being above his actual numbers. And I do think he will have, a significant offensive improvement this upcoming year. Because yeah, although he only has an 81 OPS plus over the last 2 years, he has the unluckiest difference in WOBA and expected WOBA out of 255 hitters. So I do believe in that theory that, he will be kind of an average bat, while being, overwhelmingly the best defensive player in, not only among catchers, but among all players in baseball. So yeah, I guess it's a high standard to have him in, considering that, I think he will keep being the best fielder in baseball. But, I think he will improve that offense, and that will form him into a top 3 catcher in baseball. So yeah, who do you have at number 2?
Excellent. My number 2 is a guy that I had in my number 5 spot last year, that I was a bit skeptical of, and he went out and proved me completely wrong. And it's William Contreras from the Milwaukee Brewers. I was skeptical of him last year because of his high ground ball rate and high BABIP on ground balls. I didn't think that was going to be sustainable, and it was. He had a 54% ground ball rate last year. I believe hit like a little under 300 on ground balls, if I remember correctly. And still be one of the best offensive catchers in the game. Had a 131 weighted runs created plus. Defense did regress a little bit, but he was still very strong behind the plate. Finished with a 5.4 wins above replacement, tied for the most at the position. I think the one thing I know I talked about the ground balls being a reason that I was critical of him previously. I still do think it probably kept me from putting him at number one. Because when he doesn't hit ground balls, he is awesome. He averaged 98 miles per hour on his line drives and fly balls in 2024, the sixth highest among the 179 hitters with at least 150 line drives and fly balls. And if you take a look at that list, the only hitters above him in average exit velocity were like Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, Juan Soto, O'Neill Cruz, and Kyle Schwarber. I believe those were the five. And William Contreras came in at number six. So, I mean, we're talking about a premier power hitter. He doesn't quite hit for power as much as I would like him to, but when he is lifting the ball, there are very few that does do it as well as he does. 92.8 mile per hour average exit velocity, a 10% barrel rate per batted ball. Yeah, there's a lot to like in the power numbers. Obviously, he doesn't pull it a ton, but regardless, the power numbers are still good enough to where he doesn't really need to. He can, in fact, a lot of his home runs were to center field last year. So I'm putting William Contreras in my number two spot, but very open to putting him at number one next year if he can figure out those batted ball metrics a little bit better.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. My number two is also William Contreras. He was my number four last year, and I shared a little bit of that skepticism as well, or at least just being able to consistently put it into place because he did lead all catchers in F4 in 2023. It just kind of happened sort of out of the blue, and he did it again. He actually led an F4 again last year. But yeah, so he's led all catchers in F4 each of the last 2 years. He also has the highest OPS among the current catchers with 500 plus plate appearances over the last 2 seasons, and also has +7 defensive run value over the last 2 years. Although that did, the +7 is +8 in 2023 and -1 in 2024. So if you weighted it down, it probably wouldn't be as impressive. However, you still have to recognize that he did have he is 2 years removed from a very good defensive season as well, to go along with his offense. Part of what made his offense a little bit more sustainable this past year was his average exit velocity increased by 1.5 miles per hour from 2023 to 2024, which helped him be 90th percentile, or it was above 90th percentile in expected WOBA, or is exactly 90th percentile in expected WOBA. But he was 90th percentile or higher in expected WOBA, average exit velocity, and walk rate. So those are all three very good underlying metrics that show that he can probably sustain some offensive success in the future. But yeah, I in with my number one, and I'll get into my number one, I do believe there's more untapped things that there's more things went William Contreras' way last year than the number one guy, and the number one guy had about as good a season as William Contreras. So yeah, without further ado, who is your number one catcher in baseball for
Yeah, I mean, it
2025?
sounds like for the first time this year, we will actually be agreeing on a number one. We weren't there on first base, we weren't there on center field, but we are both talking about Jacob Stallings for our catcher list. I mean, what a season he had for the Colorado Rockies. Very,
Yeah.
very exciting stuff. No, we're talking about Cal Raleigh, obviously. He was, I think, both of our number threes last year, and I would have to imagine he's both of our number ones this year. So we're pretty locked in when it comes to talking about Cal Raleigh. Yeah, I mean, he's kind of the perfect combination of what we want to see out of him offensively and what we want to see out of him defensively. He is among the best defensive catchers in the game. He had 21.8 defensive runs above average last year. He had 98th percentile framing, I believe was second in baseball. And yeah, just overall was a very solid catcher. I love his batted ball distribution. He's kind of exactly what he's supposed to be for a guy that, uh, comes in at 6'3", 235 pounds as a catcher. If you had to ask a guy like that, what do you want him to be offensively? You'd say, I want him to have more fly balls than ground balls, and that's exactly what he has. A 36% ground ball rate last year, to go along with a 45.5% pull rate, which is just awesome. To get more into that, among the 170 hitters with at least 300 batted balls in 2024, Cal Raleigh ranked third in fly ball rate, tied for second in pulled fly ball rate at 14.4%, and eighth in barrel rate at a 15.4%. And also among the 100 hitters with at least 100 fly balls, he ranks 10th in percent of fly balls that were pulled at 39.4%. He does everything so perfectly. Obviously, the strikeout rate you'd want to be lower, but that's a little too much to ask sometimes given the state of the game right now. But he hits the ball very hard. He hits it in the air. He pulls it. He also has a high sweet spot rate. Despite that, he walks a lot. He does pretty much anything that you could possibly ask him to do, and he is my number one catcher in baseball.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he is Cal Raleigh is also my number one catcher in baseball. Because yeah, he is he's heading into his age 28 season. He does have the second most F4 among catchers over the last 2 years. And a lot of that has to do with his defensive value that you just talked about. He has the third highest defensive runs above average among all fielders over the last 2 years, not just among catchers, but all fielders. And this past year he put up career highs in all expected numbers and average exit velocity. And he also put up, as you mentioned, the 10th highest rate of fly balls being pulled out of 101 hitters. So I think my logic with Cal Raleigh being above William Contreras is, for whatever reason, his expected numbers were, or his WOBA trailed his expected WOBA by 23 points last year, but his pulled fly ball rate stayed very, very good. And usually, oftentimes, uh, you know, lack of luck, at least in the expected number spectrum, can be explained by, not pulling fly balls or hitting fly balls to wrong areas of the ballpark because StatCast does not, expected numbers do not factor what part of the park you're hitting your fly balls. But he is pulling, still a great number of fly balls. So I imagine that the difference in actual numbers and expected numbers can be just explained by bad luck. I think that's what it was. So if that's the case, then I expect him to have even better offensive numbers last year while maintaining great status as a defensive catcher. The guy also, not to mention, we don't mention awards that much, but he won the Platinum Glove last year. So
Yeah.
not only do we think he's a great defender and do the numbers think he's a great defender, but the voters do as well. So, and yeah, he rightfully earned that Platinum Glove. He's one of the most defensively valuable players in baseball, while also being pretty offensively valuable as well. I mean, if I think his OPS plus was above 110, which, for the catcher position is, very, very good. It might as well be in the 120s when you're a catcher. Yeah, he was at 119 OPS plus last year, 114 the year before, 122 the year before that. So he's been very consistently, comfortably above average as an offensive player while being one of the best defenders in baseball. And there's potential that he can do even more offensively, considering some of the improvements that he made last year. So yeah, I'm excited about Cal Raleigh's potential. Shout out to us, yeah, last year having him at number 3 and MLB Network having him at number 9, which was a shame. They must be,
Yeah, shout out to us for being right on that one.
yeah, it must be they look too much into like B War instead of F War.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was a
They
problem.
they play at Will Smith like number 3 then.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, so yeah, without further ado, let's do our 10 through 1.
Yeah, so at number 10, I have Will Smith. Number 9, Gabriel Moreno. Number 8, Alejandro Kirk. Number 7, Francisco Alvarez. Number 6, Austin Wells. Number 5, Sean Murphy. Number 4, Patrick Bailey. Number 3, Adley Rutschman. Number 2, William Contreras. And number 1, Cal Raleigh. Honorable mentions, guys that I consider that didn't quite make the list. believe it or not, my number 11 was Salvador Perez. I was so close to putting him on this list. Which if you've listened to this show before, you know that I have been rather critical of him in the past, but he was good enough last year and improved on many of the things that I have not been a fan of his on previously, enough to where I almost put him on this list. Additionally, JT Realmuto, Jake Rogers, Yander Diaz, who was mentioned on Chris's list, and Ryan Jeffers.
Yeah, I can imagine that was hard to choose from. My number 10 was Gabriel Moreno, number 9 Alejandro Kirk, number 8 Will Smith, number 7 Yander Diaz, number 6 Austin Wells, number 5 Sean Murphy, number 4 Adley Rutschman, number 3 Patrick Bailey, number 2 William Contreras, and number 1 Cal Raleigh. I also considered Salvador Perez, but I think what detracted me from using him is, that year was kind of, last year was kind of random for him. He wasn't, he didn't have a consistent track record of success over the last 3 years. It was just mostly last year, and I guess his previous good year before that was 2021. But also much of his success from last year occurred early in the season, and then he kind of transformed back into his old self. I'm trying to find where he ranked among catchers in F4 from June 6th on, which is when he kind of was brought back to earth a little bit. Because let's take a look at where he ranked. Because I want to explain, because I'm sure a lot of people do have him, would have him in the top 10 list. He ranked 23rd in F4 among catchers from June 6th on last year. So I'm kind of going based more off of that, and also the fact that he's heading into his age 35 season. So youth is not necessarily on his side. So I considered Francisco Alvarez a bit as well. That's our 10 through 1. That's our top 10 catchers. Those are our top 10 catchers in baseball. So that does it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio. We hope you enjoyed this one. If you are
Stay
listening
tuned next week for shortstops. We're just knocking out all the premium defensive positions.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be lots of guys who are fairly average offensively going to be making the lists these past few weeks.
Like the top 4, because the Dodgers are doing Mookie Betts a short again.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So like the top 4 are going to be interesting.
Yeah, certainly. I guess the thing about doing these positional rankings this early in the year is sometimes you don't know exactly where people are playing. Like, we had Mookie Betts on the second base list last year.
That
and
is
then
true.
All of a sudden they changed it. Stay tuned for shortstops next. That's going to be a fun list to put together, because there's going to be a lot of players that are on there that are going to be on the top 50 list. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and want to watch the conversation as it happens, go to the YouTube channel. It is called Above Replacement Radio. If you want to follow us on social media, follow me on Twitter at Chris_Gianta. Follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Curran, and follow the show Instagram at Above Replacement Radio for all the show needs. We hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope to see you next time, where we will be talking all the happenings in Major League Baseball once again, as well as the top 10 shortstops in baseball. See you then.
This conversation is over.